Hey there, survivors. Thanks for tuning in to tonight's episode. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It really helps me keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now let's get started. I have to record what happened. If there's still a chance anyone might listen, I want to get the facts straight and in my own voice. My name is Henry Godwin. I was, if I'm still considered employed, a Level 2 process technician at the Fernside Water Treatment Facility outside Glossop in Derbyshire. For the past 5 years, I've lived and worked around the Peak District, maintaining filtration systems and quality checks for drinking water that services part of the county. It's a quiet life usually. Or it was. Then the rumours started. Government containment, strange incidents in the village, armed men near the plant gates. Everything unravelled faster than I ever thought possible. Now, I'm locked inside the plant's control room, unsure if I'll ever see anyone normal, again. I need to start at the beginning, or at least close to it. The first signs appeared about 3 weeks ago, though I wouldn't have recognised them for what they were until recently. People from the nearby hamlet of Crowden started complaining about unusual tastes in their tap water. Our consumer hotline got a handful of calls every month for minor issues, cloudiness, mild odour, that sort of thing. But something about the new wave of complaints was different. Residents described an almost metallic, slightly bitter aftertaste. Others mentioned small flecks swirling in the water. I went out with a sampling kit to check the reservoir above Crowden. It's a place overshadowed by gritstone edges and moorland. The site has raw water that flows into our system, eventually heading to the main Fernside plant for treatment. That day, I took the old forest track up the hill, stepping over patches of wet grass and stones. The weather was unsettled. Wind gusted across the valley, carrying faint echoes of sheep calling on the higher slopes. Everything looked normal. The water lapped at the bank in slow, steady motions. On the surface, I noticed a subtle but unusual sheen, like oil swirling in faint rainbow hues. I ran the standard tests: clarity, pH, temperature, turbidity. The numbers were off, just slightly. Turbidity was elevated, though not alarmingly so. Still, I collected samples in multiple sterile bottles. It was procedure, but something about the place left an impression that day. Some part of me couldn't wait to finish and get back inside. As I passed through Crowden on the way back, I spotted a man standing by the roadside. His name was Gerald Bates, a local orchard keeper in his mid-60s. He'd always been friendly in the past. That afternoon, he stared at me with one eye half closed, as if the sunlight was bothersome. His greeting was polite enough, but his voice had a strange edge. He asked if the water was making people ill, said he'd heard rumours of folks at the local clinic complaining about dizziness and irritability. He even mentioned that a few had small sores that wouldn't heal. I told him the best I could do was run the sample tests and reassure him we would handle any contamination if found. His gaze lingered on me, not in a panicked way, but with a cautious energy I'd never sensed from him before. When I got back to Fernside, I put the samples through more advanced analysis, checking for chemical contaminants, heavy metals, microbial presence. That's standard procedure whenever a complaint about taste or odour is lodged. Nothing jumped out as alarming. We did see an uptick in microorganisms, but not the usual suspects like E. coli or common parasites. This was something new. Because it didn't match typical contaminants in the database, my immediate assumption was a small algae bloom or a non-pathogenic protozoan. We adjusted the disinfectant levels slightly and prepared to do more frequent backwashing of our filters. In retrospect, I suspect that was the earliest presence of the mutated parasite in our data, but at the time I labelled it as a possible anomaly and wrote it up for follow-up tests. Life goes on at a water treatment facility, and we're always on alert for slight changes in raw water sources. That's part of the job. That same week, my line manager, Shirley Dixon, told me about an odd incident in Torside, another settlement a few miles upstream. A few of the outlying farms reported livestock acting strangely. sheep standing in corners of fields by themselves, not responding to herding dogs. Another rumor claimed that a farmer discovered brownish lesions on a few lambs. None of it directly indicated a water-related issue, but combined with Crowden's concerns, Shirley and I agreed to add Torside to our sampling list. We wanted to reassure the local council that we were on top of things. Before I could manage that, other responsibilities took center stage. Fernside is a mid-sized treatment facility, overseeing clarification, filtration, and chlorination. On Monday, I spent hours reprogramming one of the older clarifiers that had shorted out during a lightning storm the previous night. The smell of burnt wiring hung in the air. My mind was full of numbers and checklists, so I barely noticed the commotion when 2 local police cars pulled up outside the main gates. One of our operators came in with eyes wide, letting me know the police were asking about serious health issues in the local villages. This was the first I'd heard of an official concern. I spoke with a young constable who mentioned a spate of hospital admissions in the last 48 hours. People complaining of light sensitivity, disorientation, and unusual rashes. Some had minor blackening or peeling around their fingertips, and were apparently convinced it was some contagious disease. The constable didn't have more details, just that it was an active investigation. He asked if there had been any chemical leaks, because rumors were going around about toxic waste. I assured him we had everything under control on the water side. No official data indicated a harmful leak. We parted ways, though not before I noticed the constable discreetly surveying the plant, as if expecting secret barrels of green ooze. It all felt like a scene from a conspiracy film. I remember wishing the local rumor mill would calm down. I turned back to the clarifier and tried to refocus on real tasks. The next day, headlines in the Manchester Evening News read, "Chemical spill suspected in Derbyshire sickness." Beneath that was an article describing more unusual behavior in rural communities. Residents reported sudden aggression. The piece was short on facts, but rich in speculation. The only official statement was from a council representative, insisting that the water was safe and urging people not to panic. I felt uneasy reading those words, especially since they mirrored my own typical reassurance. Could we be missing something? By the end of that week, our daily water samples started showing a dramatic spike in an unknown organism. The lab identified it as some kind of protozoan parasite. Very little matched known references. We had partial similarities to a family of parasitic flagellates that infect fish, but these were inconclusive. The lab recommended we escalate to the Health and Safety Executive, HSE, for further analysis. Shirley prepared the paperwork, and I kept running more advanced tests. In the petri dish, these microorganisms had a shape reminiscent of slender rods, with a faint spiral pattern. They moved in erratic pulses, quickly forming clusters when introduced to warm conditions. Even after applying disinfectant solutions, a portion of the population remained active. It was resilient. Our facility relied on a standard multi-barrier approach to water treatment: flocculation with aluminium sulfate, sedimentation in large tanks, rapid sand filtration, then chlorination, or sometimes UV. Typically, protozoa get filtered out and inactivated, but we suspected this strain had adapted or mutated in a way that made it more resistant. At that point, we had no evidence it was dangerous to humans. Microbial anomalies aren't unheard of. Still, I felt a prickle on the back of my neck whenever I peered through the microscope, seeing that rhythmic movement continue under conditions that usually wipe out common parasites. The next major development arrived unexpectedly in the form of government vehicles rumbling down our access road. Late that Friday, a pair of unmarked vans parked at the visitor center. Suits stepped out, official-looking individuals, none wearing any clear insignia except a small ID badge I didn't recognize. They requested a meeting with the plant manager, Elaine O'Connor. She ushered them into a side office. I only caught fragments of the conversation, something about containment protocol and public safety. Shortly after, we were told to keep quiet about any new findings and redirect external inquiries to a specialized hotline. Most of us looked at each other with the same unspoken question. Why this level of secrecy? Still, we complied, too stunned to protest. We had no context. That night, security at our gates doubled. As for me, I decided to do some unauthorized investigating, driven by a need to understand what was going on. I have a background in environmental sciences, so I know how to read academic papers and cross-reference waterborne pathogens. Using my phone, I searched for references to protozoan parasites known to cause severe neurological or dermatological effects. A handful exist. Negleria fowleri, the so-called brain-eating amoeba, is one, but that thrives in warm fresh water, typically far from here. The lesions people described, the mention of rotting skin, and the aggression seemed different. This was something else, something new or drastically mutated from a benign species. That weekend, everything seemed to accelerate. Police blocked off backroads near Crowden and Torside. Some farmland was declared off-limits. The rumour of a chemical leak spread, but no official statement confirmed or denied it. Meanwhile, local clinics reported more serious incidents. People lashing out unexpectedly, experiencing nightmares that blurred into waking hallucinations, and in advanced cases, sections of discoloured tissue around the face or extremities. I heard about one person wandering barefoot along the highway at night, muttering about crawling shapes inside the lights. A driver nearly struck them. By Monday, the local hospital in Glossop closed to visitors. Staff inside were apparently overwhelmed with new admissions. The few messages that leaked out described confusion, some violence in the wards, and an inability to handle the rising number of afflicted individuals. This matched stories from Manchester Royal Infirmary, though official channels refused to confirm. At Fernside, the tension was tangible. Conversations became brief. People walked quickly through corridors, ignoring idle chatter. In the control room, red notifications popped up on our system feed, indicating large drops in reservoir levels. Official extraction, presumably, though no one gave us direct instructions. Every few hours I'd observe men in hazard suits scouring the outer fencing or patrolling the reservoir shoreline with scientific equipment. They wouldn't answer any questions, just gestured at us to keep our distance. I began documenting what I knew in a notebook I kept hidden in my locker. Daily water quality logs, glimpses of official documents, overheard conversations. It felt like preparing a report on a potential crisis. In those notes, I wrote, "They're treating this as something bigger than a normal contamination, like a biohazard." The phrase "government blackout" was something I scribbled in the margin after hearing a rumor that communications might be cut. It sounded absurd at first, but each day that passed made it feel more likely. On Tuesday, the 5th of September, I arrived for the early shift. My usual routine included checking the screens in the main control room, verifying that the flow rates, pump pressures, and chemical dosages were stable. That morning, everything was overshadowed by the presence of armed personnel stationed inside the facility. They wore no identifying marks, carried rifles, and spoke in clipped voices when approached. One of them told me that no one was allowed to exit or enter the plant without clearance. Elaine O'Connor, our manager, had apparently been forced to sign some sort of official directive. There was talk that the local government authorities had authorized them to secure critical infrastructure. The sense of isolation grew. Colleagues whispered about family members in the quarantined areas, about missed calls and text messages that went unanswered. A few tried to leave, but the front gate was locked by armed guards who insisted no one could pass. Their orders were strict, and they offered no explanation. We were told to keep working, keep the water running, and remain calm. That same day, while analyzing the day's test results in the lab, I received a call from Shirley. Her voice was hushed. She asked me to come to the upstairs storeroom. "They can't monitor us up here," she said. When I arrived, she stood near an old shelving unit filled with chemicals. Her expression looked drawn, as though she'd spent the night combing through dreadful news. She showed me lab findings that had been emailed to her from a contact at a private research facility. The data suggested this parasite had a unique life cycle with multiple stages, including one that could burrow into human tissue. The sample from Crowden, in advanced cultures, produced toxins that could interfere with neurotransmitters, leading to hallucinations and abnormal aggression. The report hinted that it could be transmissible through bodily fluids, not just water. Shirley then told me that her contact advised immediate mass treatment of the water supply, extreme measures, far beyond standard chlorination, possibly draining entire reservoirs or applying high doses of specialized disinfectants that might make the water temporarily unusable for public consumption. The government, however, had apparently vetoed such a drastic move, likely concerned about widespread panic. "We're at an impasse," Shirley said. Her hand brushed across the shelf, knocking a plastic container to the floor. She made no move to pick it up. "If we do nothing, people fall ill. If we do everything, chaos breaks out." She paused, trembling in a way that wasn't easy to ignore. "We need to do something." I asked if we could shut down the flow from Crowden, maybe isolate it from the network. Shirley said that was already being done, quietly. But the parasite was presumably in more than one reservoir by now, maybe traveling through connected channels or in local water tanks that feed the distribution mains. I spent that afternoon balancing on a precarious edge between panic and grim focus. The overhead lights in the corridors seemed harsher than usual. The hum of fans in the filtration galleries had an eerie rhythm. I updated the chemical feed for the disinfection stage, increasing chlorine dosage, though not enough to cause the water to smell strongly or irritate consumers. The guards in the hallway shot me suspicious glances whenever I moved from one area to another. Late in the day, I noticed a dull ache spreading across my left forearm. That alone wouldn't worry me, but I recalled the story of how early lesions had appeared as small patches, sometimes feeling numb or tender. Trying not to spiral into paranoia, I checked my arm in the restroom. Nothing obvious, just a faint discoloration. Perhaps a bruise from bumping into equipment. But my reflection in the mirror seemed slightly off, as if my own gaze carried doubt. That evening, the facility overhead speakers crackled to life with an announcement. "All staff are to remain on site until further notice. Please direct inquiries to the main security checkpoint." The voice was one I didn't recognize. People in the hallway stopped in their tracks. The finality in that message felt like a steel barrier slamming down. When I tried calling family, I realized my phone had lost its data signal, and the landlines were restricted to internal calls only. Even the internet had slowed to a crawl. We were in a sealed bubble. We had cots and a small dormitory for staff who lived far away, so some of us bedded down there. Others found quiet corners in offices. That night, the lights outside shone onto empty farmland. A string of vehicles occasionally passed, covered in tarps. I sat on my bunk, reading every note I'd made in my personal journal. Sleep never really came, just a series of restless moments. Early the next morning, I was jolted from a half-doze by sudden shouting in the hallway. I grabbed my passkey and ventured out. One of our engineers, Ryan Birch, stood near the door to the pumping station with a frantic look. He muttered that one of the newly arrived security officers had an open wound on his face, a patch of skin darkening around the jaw. According to Ryan, the officer had started yelling, demanding help, then collapsed. Others rushed him away into a private room. That was the last we heard. The quiet that followed was unsettling, as if the facility itself was holding its breath. A short while later, the overhead speaker came on again, instructing everyone not to approach certain restricted areas. The voice used the phrase aggressive contagion, which I hadn't heard in any official capacity before. My mind connected the dots. The parasite, presumably, was no longer confined to the water supply or the local residents. It had infiltrated our facility's security detail. If that was the case, how many staff members had it reached? Trying to channel my anxiety into something productive, I returned to the lab, trying new combinations of disinfectants, raising heat in sample vials, bombarding them with UV. Some subpopulations of the parasite died, but others survived. It was as if we were dealing with multiple strains or a single strain with extraordinary adaptability. My incomplete notes indicated that once it found a human host, it might replicate in ways we didn't fully grasp. rumors spread that local broadcasts were being cut. The BBC's frequency for our region looped an emergency message about a weather-related advisory. I tried the radio on my phone. Most stations were static, or repeated the same reassurance that official channels will provide updates soon. The sense of an impending blackout was real. On the following day, by then, the entire situation had me mentally pacing like a caged animal. The front gates were sealed by large metal barriers. No staff were allowed out. The armed men had set up a perimeter. 1 or 2 times, I caught glimpses of new arrivals in heavy protective gear, carrying sealed black cases. The staff scurried about, overshadowed by a growing sense that we were just cogs in a machine running on autopilot. That night, I spotted Shirley at the canteen, leaning over a bowl of stew. We locked eyes, and I approached. She asked me, quietly, if I had experienced any unusual symptoms. I paused, recalled the dull ache in my arm, the sense of disorientation I'd been dismissing as exhaustion. In the bright overhead light, I told her I was fine. She responded by slowly rolling up her sleeve, revealing a cluster of faint greyish patches near her elbow. "I can't feel anything in this spot," she murmured, touching it lightly. She explained that she thought it might be an advanced stage of whatever parasite was moving through the water supply. Her mouth set in a firm line. "We need to keep working, though, for everyone else." I wanted to tell her to get help, to see a doctor, but the medical staff on site had seemingly vanished with the special team that arrived earlier, or else they weren't responding to staff requests. An oppressive hush lay over the facility. The security personnel watched from the corners, apparently unaffected by any moral concern. 2 days later, the final stage of the crisis descended. Power flickered in and out. The overhead speakers occasionally hissed with static. Someone in the maintenance department said the outside lines had been cut, presumably by whatever shadowy authority was orchestrating this lockdown. Fernside felt like a fortress turned prison. Each day, fewer staff were seen in the corridors. Some insisted on locking themselves in offices, terrified of infection. Others were forcibly escorted away for checkups if they showed any visible signs of illness. Late one evening, I made my way to the main reservoir gatehouse to check on the mechanical valves. By then, so many new pipes and bypass lines had been installed that I could barely keep track of the changes. Lights flickered along the hallway. A faint drip echoed from somewhere, reminding me that water was once a source of comfort. Now, it felt ominous. I opened the door to the gatehouse control panel, letting in a swirl of cold air. Some movement in the corner startled me. A figure hunched near a stack of metal piping. The shape turned, and in the half-light, I recognized Gerald Bates, the orchard keeper from Crowden. How he got inside was beyond me. His posture was twisted at an odd angle, and the darkness around his hands suggested something deeply wrong. He mumbled something about his orchard rotting, about the trees whispering at night. Then he rose in a stiff motion and left without acknowledging me further. I stared, stunned. I debated calling for help, but part of me felt no one would respond. Instead, I locked the gatehouse door from inside, my hands shaking so badly I had to grip the handle to remain steady. The official logs from that night show, I recalibrated the flow meters and confirmed partial closures in certain lines. I did my job on autopilot. In the lonely silence of that room, I could hardly organize my thoughts. That was the moment I became certain of my own infection. My memory blurred. I remember pulling my sleeve back, forcing myself to look at the area I'd noticed days ago. The discoloration was bigger now. A faint dryness extended across the skin. I touched it gingerly, no sensation. Time lost its usual meaning. The final push came when an alarm blared throughout the facility. Not our typical water quality alert, but a shrieking siren that signified some ultimate emergency. Red lights pulsed from the rafters. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown sender. "Leave if you can, everything is compromised." I didn't recognize the number. I tried to reply, but it wouldn't send. I ran through the corridor to the control center. No one was there except one security guard slumped over a console, unresponsive. The monitors showed multiple cameras offline. In the corner feed, I saw one of the lab sections in disarray, glass shattered, smears along the floors. Shadows flickered in and out of sight. The entire facility reeked of confusion and abandonment. I tried the main doors, sealed. Heavy bars locked from the outside. The smaller side exits were no better. It was as if the entire building had been locked tight to keep something in. Us. I found a battered radio near the security desk. Static greeted me on every frequency, except for a faint loop that repeated, "Emergency alert, infected water supply, stay indoors," over and over. No additional context, just that ominous directive. For a few hours, I wandered corridors that were half lit, trying to find a sense of direction. Occasionally, I heard distant scuffles, doors slamming. Once, a guard rushed past carrying what looked like a sidearm, shouting that the perimeter had been breached by civilians seeking refuge. Or so I overheard. Another time, in a far corner near the maintenance bays, I glimpsed a figure in the darkness, leaning against the wall. Then it sank to the floor, silent, and I dared not move closer. Eventually, I slipped back into the central control room, the place with the largest lockable door. I sealed myself inside, and here I've remained, writing my account on the battered computer terminal, transferring some notes from my physical journal. Outside, the lights flicker. I see shapes flit past the tinted windows. No one tries to get in, at least not yet. Maybe they think I'm not worth the effort, or they don't know I'm here. I've begun analyzing my condition more closely. My senses aren't what they used to be. Certain noises seem amplified. Sometimes letters on the screen flicker at the edge of my vision, turning into crawling patterns. The dryness on my forearm has spread towards my wrist. I notice small cracks in the skin. I've tried applying antiseptic, but it's done nothing. The color is closer to an ashen grey now. It doesn't hurt in the conventional sense. If I poke it or apply pressure, I sense nothing. My reflection on the dark glass of the console shows me looking pale, with mild discoloration around my cheekbones. It's only a matter of time before the parasite's effects progress. I keep telling myself, document everything, tell the truth. But clarity slips in and out. The simplest tasks, like checking the water pressure readouts, require more effort. At times, I find myself standing and staring at the metal floor for minutes on end, or more. I'm unsure how long I've been in here. Could be 2 days, could be 5. The overhead fluorescent lights hum, occasionally buzzing louder like a swarm of insects. I've considered venturing outside, but every time I approach the door, I recall the silent forms I saw in the hallways. And I recall that some succumbed to a frantic aggression once the infection advanced. In an attempt at final closure, I managed to salvage a portion of the security footage from the plant's server. Some are short clips, others freeze the moment they begin. One shows a cluster of men and women in the canteen corner, leaning or swaying. Another shows a small break room where a figure stands rigid, half turned to the camera, mouth partly open. The timestamps jump around, making it impossible to piece together a linear progression. It's a patchwork of haunting glimpses. At least I can guess how the government might respond next. Sealing the facility was a sign they wanted no one leaving. The repeated "stay indoors" message on the radio suggests some attempt at controlling the public narrative. Perhaps outside, the story is that this is just a dangerous chemical spill or a widespread contamination scare that's being contained. Or maybe the news is out in the open, and the region is under complete quarantine. I have no way of knowing. The roads might be blocked all the way down to Manchester. The local villages might be overrun with people wandering or hiding in their homes. The orchard in Crowden, the farmland in Torside, they might lie still and silent under an unnaturally quiet sky. I wonder if my colleagues managed to escape. If any of them found a gap in the perimeter, or a moment when the guards were overwhelmed. Shirley was last seen in the laboratory building. I recall her determination, her refusal to give up. She might have found a path out, or she might still be inside, locked in some other room, clinging to hope. Each time I think about going to search for her, the corridor outside grows more imposing. Food is scarce in here. I have a few protein bars, a canister of water that I ironically extracted from a small filtration unit. I stare at the water, uncertain if it's safe to drink, though my thirst is undeniable. My mind drifts to memories of simpler times, routine checks of pH and chlorine residual, casual chats in the staff lounge, silly debates about football. I recall the city lights of Manchester on the horizon, the hum of normal life. All of that feels like a distant dream. Occasionally, a dull pounding sound echoes from somewhere below. Perhaps the pumps switching on and off, or something else. I look at the security monitor, but half the cameras show only darkness. The others flicker, revealing empty corridors. I catch my own reflection in the control screen, noticing that my hair hangs limp. My eyes have an unfamiliar glaze. There's a stain near the collar of my shirt. Where did that come from? I struggle to focus on specifics. I keep writing because the thought of leaving no record is worse than any fear of dying or succumbing to this parasite. People deserve to know how it started. Anyone reading this might be able to connect the dots and learn from our mistakes. It began as a faint sheen on the reservoir, an odor complaint here, a taste complaint there. Then it grew, slipping silently through the water distribution network, unstoppable by standard disinfectants. By the time the government stepped in, it was too large to quarantine with simple measures. They tried to hide it. Maybe they told themselves it was for the greater good, to prevent mass panic. But in so doing, they left so many in the dark. And now the darkness is all there is. What exactly happens when the parasite fully takes hold? Hallucinations, bursts of rage, blackened patches of dead tissue, some form of neurological breakdown. I suspect it turns people into something else, maybe a shell controlled by the parasite's impulses. That might be the ultimate fate I'm facing. As I type this, certain words on the screen almost seem to shift or crawl. I have to blink to reassure myself it's only my mind playing tricks. I'm not sure how this ends, if it ends at all. But if I have the will, I'll gather any last bits of lab data that might help. There's a chance some part of the system might automatically upload data if the lines come back online, or if someone retrieves our internal drives. I'll hide the data near the clarifier or the main reservoir gatehouse, someplace that might survive if they decide to blow the plant. Maybe they will. Maybe that's the final solution, to remove the source of infection in one controlled blast. They might do it at night, with no warning. A silent flash that demolishes everything, leaving a smoldering ruin. Then the public might be told a story about an industrial accident, another footnote in the news cycle. As for me, I can't run. The infection has me in its jaws, and I know I'll only slip further away. But I can still leave my story. That's what this is. My real account, no matter how it ends. This is the final testament of Henry Godwin, Level 2 process technician at Fernside Water Treatment Facility near Glossop, Derbyshire. Everything I've written is true to the best of my knowledge. If you find this, share it. Let people know that we did our best, but the system, the secrecy, the unstoppable nature of the parasite, it all added up to a catastrophe that no single person could stop. I'm saving this file in as many places as I can. The facility computers are on backup power now, so I'm not sure how much time I have left before complete shutdown. If the lights go out and the corridors plunge into darkness, I'll lock the control room door and wait. The dryness on my arm might spread, perhaps to my chest, my face. Maybe I'll see things that aren't there. Maybe I'll become one of those silent shapes wandering the halls. Or maybe I'll gather the last of my strength and do one final act of sabotage. Flood the plant with high doses of chemicals to kill the parasite in the water, if that's even possible. But that's if I can muster the will to act. The edges of my thoughts feel fuzzy, like the hum in the fluorescent tubes is burrowing inside my head. I hear a scraping noise outside the door, The console shows no one in the hallway camera, so it must be just around the corner. The radio loop continues. Emergency alert. Infected water supply. Stay indoors. Over and over. Outside, darkness settles over the moorland. This place was once so familiar, just a small water treatment plant in a quiet corner of Derbyshire. Now, it's the center of something I can't fully grasp. I don't know how long I'll remain lucid, or if the government will break through that door first. One thing is certain. The truth is that a mutated parasite changed everything, and I, for one, refuse to let my story vanish without witness. If anyone else survives, if there's some future where people still read or listen, remember that we did what we could. Remember how quickly things can slip beyond control. And please, if you find these words, learn from them. Don't let this happen again. I can't write much more. The lights flicker. The hallway camera sparks, showing a faint silhouette drifting past. I'll upload all remaining logs. If the power holds, it might go out to the remote servers. If not, maybe someone rummaging through the rubble will discover this terminal. Whoever you are, please heed my final words. The water was compromised. The parasite was real. Government hush-ups may silence the details, but these events happened in Crowden, Torside, Fernside, and possibly beyond. If you have the means, remain vigilant. Check your surroundings, question official narratives, and whatever you do, do not consume untreated water if there's any question of contamination. The illusions are strong, the aggression unstoppable, and the physical decay inexorable. This is Henry Godwin signing off. I'm setting this to autosave every 30 seconds. The overhead speaker just crackled again, but it's only static, or maybe voices I can't distinguish. The dryness on my arm is creeping upward. My head feels heavy, the console letters blurred. Something outside taps on the metal frame. I'll try not to let it in. End of log. Stay safe, and if you're reading, I'm counting on you to remember my story. Let the truth see daylight, or what's left of daylight in this part of the world. I can only hope. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unsettling creepypastas. Your support keeps my channel alive. Until next time, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and trust nothing, not even the silence.